Welcome, everybody, back into Nerd Sesh. As always, I'm Carson Bradburn, and alongside me is Logan Camden, and today we are going to be giving our predictions for the NBA Finals. We've got Pacers versus Thunder, both teams with an opportunity to win, in Indiana's case, their first title in franchise history, and for Oklahoma City, their first title since they moved from Seattle. So lots on the line, a matchup that I am very excited for. And I want to start this breakdown, Logan, by looking at the best player in this series, and that is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. How do you expect Indiana to try to deal with him on the defensive end? And do you think that they really have any answers for him?
No. I think Indiana's best course of action is to go to church and to pray that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander doesn't kill them. Carson, something that really ticked me off about one of the social clips that you put out, not you specifically. I thought your content's excellent, man.
Thanks, bro.
The response really infuriated me when a lot of people came back and said that, why are we acting like Shai's an all-time great? Why are we acting like Shai is so special? A lot of the response seemed to just be, what are we doing? It's too early for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And one, I think he is going to have a massive series in this against Indiana. I don't think anybody can hold him on Indiana, but I think it's really preposterous to claim that he's not already an all-time great player and scorer of the basketball. I think he's due for a historic NBA Finals series. Carson, this guy has averaged 3 straight seasons of 30 points per game on over 62% true shooting. Do you know the only player that has more seasons doing that in NBA history?
You know, it may sound crazy. The first guy who actually comes to mind was Adrian Dantley, but it is.
That's correct. Adrian Dantley did it 4 straight seasons from the 80-81 season to the 83-84 season. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has done it the last 3 seasons. And so, you go, Adrian Dantley's maybe you don't think Adrian Dantley's an all-time great. Okay, he is an all-time great scorer. Carson, nobody else has ever done that 3 or more times in their career, let alone consecutively. Like, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is just at one of the all-time scoring peaks in NBA history, and I'm tired of acting like he isn't. The only other guys who have done it twice, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, Damian Lillard, and Stephen Curry. The only other players who have done it one time are James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Karl Malone. This guy's done that 3 straight seasons, man. He is so efficient, he is so effective, and he can do it in basically any environment against any competition. So I just wanted to get that before we get into the specifics of this series. I want to get that out because, guys, we don't have to look at stuff in retrospect to appreciate it. We can appreciate it in the moment. And I think we can appreciate right now that Shai Gilgeous is an all-time talent and an all-time player. He doesn't have to have a championship ring on his finger already to validate that. But when we are looking at the specific of this series, in the regular season, the Pacers tried to guard him basically with Andrew Nembhard. That was his primary matchup. And against Nembhard, he gave him 27 points on 11 of 18 shooting, 61% from the field. I think he's probably going to be the primary matchup. I think we might get a little bit of Aaron Nesmith. But this is also an Indiana defense that likes to switch a lot too. And so I think that he's going to be facing a lot of different coverages depending on a possession-to-possession basis. But basically, I don't think there's a single player on the Pacers roster that can guard this guy. I don't think anybody can hold him. I think he's going to abuse his matchup one-on-one. I think he's going to abuse switches in this series. I just think that all that mess that people have been talking about SGA over this past couple of years, all the noise that we got out of the Mavericks series last season that I thought was nonsensical, and all of the skepticism in this playoff run, I think it's going to come to a head, and I think Shai's just going to dominate. I think he is going to have a dominant final series because I don't think there's anybody on Indiana that can guard him, man. So I think the best player in the world this season is going to dominate, man. I expect a 30-point per game. I just mean that because he won MVP. I still think Jokic is a little bit better. We can add that.
Well, they're just different things, all I'm saying. And if you want to make the claim, but best player in the world is a different thing from MVP.
On the planet, he was this season, man. 30 points per game, I think, is an easy thing to pencil SGA in for, and I think pretty damn efficiently, man. I think he's going to be the best player on the floor in this series, and I don't think there's a good answer for him on Indiana's side.
He absolutely destroyed the Pacers this season, and it's only a 2-game sample size, but he gave them 39, 7, and 8 on 71% true shooting. All of those numbers were among his top 5 marks against any opponent this year. You mentioned how much he destroyed Andrew Nembhard, but truly, I don't think that the Pacers have any sort of answer for SGA. They could not keep him out of the paint in this regular season, and they tried to load up on him, and they tried to shadow him with the second defender, and they weren't afraid to double team, and when they did that, he just picked them apart as a passer. He truly is one of the greatest scorers and one of the greatest offensive engines that we've seen. I mentioned this stat the other day, but he is one of 5 guys ever to have a 12-game stretch in the playoffs, averaging 36 and 7 on 60% true shooting. That club is him, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, Nikola Jokic, and James Harden. So his game is already scaling to the postseason at an all-time level, and I think that this is the best matchup that he has had up to this point in the postseason. For Indiana, here's what I would try. I would put Nesmith on him instead of Nembhard because he was so effective against Nembhard. Nesmith didn't play in their first matchup, and then he was mostly guarding J-Dub in the second. But I think that he is a better option. He's bigger, he's stronger, he's longer than Nembhard. So I would go with him. And I think it's very important that Indiana makes a fundamental adjustment to their identity defensively because this is a team that likes to pick up full court. This is a team that applies as much ball pressure as anybody. They need to forget about that. It just doesn't work against SGA. We saw how easily he was able to get past Jaden McDaniels over and over again when his pickup point was too high. He's just too shifty. He's just too quick. And once you let him get downhill, it's already over. So you have to give him a little bit more cushion to try to force him into some of those pull-up threes. And if that's going at a high level too, well, then you're just dealing with one of the greatest scorers of all time, and there's nothing that you can do. But it's important to me that they have a lower pickup point on SGA than they often do against opposing guards. And then I think that they have to load up on him, and they have to try to make him beat them as a passer and dare anybody else to beat them offensively with their shooting and with their play finishing, because there's just nothing else that you can do. Like, I think that Nesmith is probably a better option than Nembhard, but I still don't think that he's quick enough for Shai. And at the end of the day, like, nobody can keep Shai from getting to his spots on an island. And he's one of the best shot makers from the intermediate range that we've ever seen, with one of the deepest bags and some of the most extensive counters that we've seen. So that's just going to be the reality. If you let him play one-on-one, he's going to destroy you as a scorer. I think out of pick and roll, they can have Miles Turner play more of like a high drop coverage, not a deep drop, because then I think that Shai destroys
I don't think
you.
Can switch at all.
Oh, no question. I mean, I don't think that they'll even consider that. But I think that you have him play in a higher drop where hopefully he can challenge some of those pull-up mid-range looks from Shai. Now, the concern there is he's so quick. He's so good shifting gears. If Miles Turner comes out too high, Shai will blow past him. But if he can find that right balance of playing in a higher drop, maybe try to force Chet to beat you more as a pop or take away some of those money looks for Shai, that would be more effective, I think, than the alternative coverages out of pick and roll. You mentioned that he's going to see multiple defenders, and part of that is switching. But part of that is also, I just think that Indiana will give him multiple looks, because if you come out and Nembhard's on him and he's frying Nembhard, at some point you might as well try a different matchup, and that's when you go to Nesmith maybe. I also would like to see Jarris Walker on Shai, at least for some possessions.
Me too.
I also just want to see Jarris Walker play in this series. I think that overall his versatility defensively, his switchability is really valuable potentially in this matchup. Do I think Jarris Walker is the answer for Shai? No. Do I think that he's quick enough? No, but he's a big physical defender, and he's a guy I want to see on the floor for them.
And I think it's important, one of the things you mentioned with the dynamic between Nembhard and Nesmith, the reason that I also prefer Nesmith is that strength advantage. You see a lot in their initial matchups where SGA is going at Nembhard, and he does this with everybody too, but it's that elbow work, it's that movement where he can just... SGA is deceptively strong. He's not like built, like rocked up, but he's wiry. He's very, very strong. And Nembhard's got the quickness and the foot speed to keep up with him, but I think SGA is going to abuse him there. So I wouldn't hesitate to put stronger defenders on him and have guys that can be physical with him. Also, I don't know how you feel about this, Carson, because it's probably not the most moral strategy for Indiana. I'm going to maximize my fouls. And what I mean by that is I'm not going like Jordan rules in the 80s, but if SGA is going to go to the line, I think there needs to be a sort of intimidation factor when he's going downhill. And I'm not saying like foul the shit out of him, but I'm going to foul him a little hard, man. He's going to get – I just want him to think in the back of his mind a little bit. And maybe if that involves throwing Tony Bradley to the Wolves or a Thomas Bryant, man, it may be a little bit cheeky, but I would play Shai really, really physical and get him second-guessing driving.
Yeah, I just don't think that's going to work. I mean, the reality is he's going to play downhill no matter what, and he is happy to take all the free throws you want to give him. You foul him, man, fine, he'll head to the line.
I mean, just foul him hard. If you're going to foul him, don't give him any of that. I'm going to give him a love tap.
I just don't think it matters. You know, we saw Ant try some of the intimidation shit early in that series against the Thunder, and then Shai absolutely fried them for the entire series. So I see what you're saying. It might as well make your fouls count. I just don't think that's actually going to matter.
I just think you need to establish any kind of edge you can against Oklahoma City, and I don't necessarily think that that's going to be like the thing that swings it, but I don't know, man. Tony Bradley, take one for the team, man. Get ejected. Get kicked out of the series. Go hit somebody really hard.
Yeah, I don't know if I agree with you advocating for this strategy, and I don't think that it's going to be a factor in this series. But when you talk about playing Shai physically, I do think that that's a good strategy. And obviously, when we talk about playing him physically, you have to do that without fouling. So the biggest thing is don't reach. Do not reach, because he will exploit you for doing that over and over again. But trying to get up in his airspace. And I just think that, like, Nesmith, because of his strength, is a much better counter for Shai out of the post specifically. That's where he was getting a lot of easy looks against Nembhard. He's just bigger and he's more physical, and he's shooting over top of him. And Nembhard obviously can play physically. We just saw him do a hell of a job against Jalen Brunson. But I want the guy who's stronger, who's a little taller, who's got more length on those contests, and I think that that is Nesmith. But at the end of the day, kind of no matter what, I think that Shai is just going to destroy this defense. The level that he's been at for the last 2 rounds in the playoffs is astronomically high. He's the best driving and finishing guard in basketball, who also shoots 53% from that 8 to 16 feet range, where nobody can keep him from getting. And now over the last 8 games, he's shooting 40% from deep again. So that 3 ball that had left him earlier in the playoffs has come back. And they just have nobody who really has a prayer against him one-on-one. I think he's the best isolation scorer of this century. And the Pacers are not the team that is going to take him out of his element there. And again, I do think that they have to be aggressive with their coverages, sending multiple defenders at him, loading up on him. He has just shown a really impressive level of maturity as a passer as these playoffs have gone along, figuring out Denver as that series went along, figuring out Minnesota. And we already saw it in the regular season against Indiana. I mean, he was more than willing to just hit the pressure points defensively and make the kick-out pass and get his teammates involved. He is an all-time great guard. He's absolutely an all-time great guard, and he's going up against a defense that doesn't have the personnel to give him any sort of trouble. And really, really, I don't know that anybody could right now. Like, he's playing at that ridiculous a level, but it's not Indiana. What are some of the other keys for Oklahoma City's offense that you look at in this series?
Yeah, interrelated with that, the last thing I would mention with Shai is just, you touched on it, but just packing up the paint and loading it up there. This isn't a great strategy because Shai is a good playmaker, but I'm going to try to get the other guys to kill me more than anything else. I don't want Shai getting attempts at the rim. Like, you're just asking for it. And I think OKC is going to cause the Indiana defense problems on the back end with some of the things their supporting cast can do. Like, I think Chet is going to be a problem attacking closeouts with a lane. Like, as much as I always try to prop up Miles Turner, it's like he's not an elite rim protector. They don't have an elite rim protector. So, like Chet, I think is going to be a mismatch problem in this series in a lot of ways. But I'm packing the paint, and I want the supporting cast to kill me. The problem is trying to force the supporting cast to have an off series. They were down against the Nuggets. I thought J-Dub and Chet both were in that series. J-Dub was giving you 18 a night on 48% true shooting. Chet was giving you 14 on 54% true shooting. But they bounced back in a big way against the Minnesota Timberwolves. And not only that, they bounced back shooting in a big way against the Minnesota Timberwolves as well from the entire supporting cast. So that is my strategy, though, Carson. This is an elite shooting team. I think their secondary stars are great in J-Dub and Chet, and I expect them to have a good series, but I'd rather those guys kill me, and so I'm going to try to coerce them into attempting threes and seeing if we can get some long rebounds and maybe get on the break or something like that. It's just trying to limit Shai's impact as much as possible and rotating fast to make those shots more difficult. I think that's the best recipe, but again, it's easier said than done because Chet is multifaceted and can shoot from behind the arc and score at all three levels and get downhill. And the guy I am worried about really lighting Indiana up is J-Dub too, because a lot of these issues that we talk about with SGA, you only have one Aaron Nesmith. And it's like I would like to clone Aaron Nesmith and be able to put him on SGA and J-Dub both because he's one hell of a defender. Unfortunately, we do not have those technological capabilities just yet. So J-Dub, I think, is going to be a problem because of the damage that he can do from the mid-range. You're talking about with SGA, Carson, that's the range that you can't really take away in the playoffs, and J-Dub's a special mid-range scorer too. I think he's going to be able to manufacture those looks at a high level, and you're just going to hope he misses. So I think you're hoping that J-Dub and Chet have a down series because you're going to divert all of this attention to SGA. I don't think they're going to be nearly as bad as they were against Denver. And I honestly, Carson, I think that had less to do with Denver's defensive coverage and personnel than more to do with just them underperforming their standards. Like, I thought Denver defended at a decent level that series, but I thought it had more to do with those guys just being off. So you got to hope for down series from both of those guys too, and more of a down shooting series. But I don't know, Carson. There's not a ton schematically that I look at that Indiana can do. Maybe incorporate the zone a little bit more and try to throw them different looks. Like, that's something that I would try to do at points in this series that caused Oklahoma City fits. But this is an elite shooting team in the regular season, and for the most part, J-Dub and Chet were great along with SGA for most of the time. So you're kind of just hoping for a down series, and you're hoping that OKC is off from behind the arc. And if I'm OKC, I'm not hesitant to pull bad shooters. Dort's not shooting well. Boom, we're getting him out of there, man. Caruso's not hitting shots. I'm having a short leash for most of my supporting cast. I wouldn't be afraid to mix and match lineups, but I don't know, man. I think Indiana's defense is going to have to get deep in the bag, man. I'm not saying necessarily full gimmick, but I think they may have to try a lot of different strategies throughout this series.
If they let Shai beat them as a scorer repeatedly, and if they try to play him one-on-one, I think that he can easily give him 35 plus on great efficiency in this series. I think that if they take the right defensive strategy, he's still going to get his 30 a night pretty efficiently, and he's also probably going to then give them 8-9 assists a game. That's just the level that he's at right now as an offensive player. I've talked about this. No, he's not a conventionally elite playmaker, but he is such an all-time great scorer that defenses have to slant towards him so aggressively, and they have to take such chances just to keep him from killing them as a scorer, that the reads that he makes are pretty easy. And they're getting great shots for his teammates. As long as he is in the right mindset, he's getting to the right spots on the floor, he's making the reads that are available to him. He is just incredibly difficult to keep from at least getting his team a great shot. And then you look at the guys around him, and yeah, they have to make shots. And that's really the key for OKC's offense. I'm extremely confident in the level that Shai is at and what we're going to get out of him in this series. The two guys whose production has been most key for OKC is Chet and J-Dub. You mentioned the difference between the Denver series and the Minnesota series. It was massive. In the Denver series, OKC looks vulnerable, and it's basically because those two guys were struggling more offensively. Then against Minnesota, they look invincible, and it's because those two guys were awesome offensively. If you look at their splits between wins and losses in these playoffs, the difference between these two, it's jarring, man. In wins, J-Dub is giving you 21.7 points per game on 58% true shooting. In losses, J-Dub is giving you 16.8 points per game on under 45% true shooting. So when they've won, he's been very good. When they have lost, he has been awful offensively. In wins for Chet, 17 points per game on better than 62% true shooting. In losses, under 15 points per game on under 52% true shooting. So huge efficiency difference for him. Not as big a difference as J-Dub, but still a big one. So again, when those dudes are playing up to their potential, when the big three is at their best, nobody is beating OKC, and frankly, it's hard to be competitive. And I'm optimistic about what we're going to get from these guys, because I think you said it well, Logan. I thought that Denver actually did a really nice job defensively against OKC, but mostly they were just focused on Shai. I mean, the zone was all about challenging Shai and daring other guys to beat them. And J-Dub was just really off as a shooter in that series. Chet was off as a shooter in that series. Those guys both reached a different offensive level against Minnesota, and they looked really comfortable. I expect that rhythm to carry over. I also don't think that Indiana has the personnel to really challenge them. I do think that J-Dub is going to be going up against a pretty good perimeter defender either way. If it's Nesmith or Nembhard, like, I want to be clear, those are good perimeter defenders. It's just they don't have anything for Shai, in my opinion. But Chet, I think, actually has a very favorable matchup here. I think that this could easily be his best offensive series of the playoffs so far. Part of that is I expect him to play his most minutes at the 5 in this series. There are multiple reasons for that. Most of it has to do with the defense, but I don't think Isaiah Hartenstein should start in this series. I don't think that he should play a ton of minutes with Chet. And again, that is mostly about wanting to maximize their speed and versatility defensively. But offensively, I also think you want to have the most shooting possible. We've just seen that be a key for them throughout these playoffs. When teams are going to load up on Shai and try to pack paints, it's important that you can spread them out and that you have 4 shooters around him who can make shots and punish them for doing so. And Chet is also just clearly his most effective offensively at the 5. Like, the difference in his production when he is out there without Isaiah Hartenstein, when he's at center, compared to when he's with Hartenstein and he's playing power forward, it's massive, dude. When he is out there at the 5 without Hartenstein, Chet gives you 24 points per 75 possessions on 66% true shooting. When he is on the floor with Hartenstein, he gives you 15 points per 75 on under 49% true shooting. Like, that difference could not be more massive. He's got better driving lanes. He's got more opportunities to finish around the rim at the 5. He's just a much more effective offensive player overall. And in this matchup, like you mentioned Miles Turner, I think that Chet has a huge quickness advantage over him. And I think that that could be really significant. We saw how many times Cat was able to bring Miles Turner out in space and get a step on him. I think that Chet is obviously not the level of offensive player that Cat is, but he is quick as hell at the 5. And I think that that's a spot where he could really do some damage on top of the spot up shooting, which is always going to be key for him and key for this entire OKC team around Shai. Like, in the first 2 rounds, they were under 32% from 3. Last round, they were 38% from 3 as a team. That's another reason that they just separated and reached at this level where they totally dominated 3 of 5 games. When Chet and J-Dub are reliable offensively and the shooting is reliable offensively, the Thunder are just one of the best teams that we've ever seen. And it's really, really important that they have all of those elements going at a high level in this one. It doesn't have to be as great as it was against Minnesota, but you want it to be close to that. And I think it's reasonable to expect that it will be close to that, because I think that this is a matchup where those guys really all have opportunities for great series, especially Chet. I really think this could be a great Chet series.
I do too, and I think that's a really smart adjustment, because I think Hardenstein is kind of a glaring weak point in a lot of ways for OKC. We'll touch more on this when we talk about Indiana's offense, but Hardenstein already did his job. The reason they went and got him were literally for the last 2 series. The matchup against Jokic, that's why you add a Hardenstein and a Caruso, and for the matchup against the Wolves. Both of these teams are big and nasty and rebound the hell out of the ball, and so you needed both Hartenstein and Holmgren. That's why we praised that acquisition so much in the offseason. It wasn't brand new. Hardenstein had a great playoff run with the New York Knicks last year. Like, we already knew what he was capable of, but specifically the reason why we thought that was such a crucial addition was the versatility. And more often in the modern NBA, we're seeing that versatility is one of the most important things, and matchup and lineup flexibility is massive. How many different counters, how many different looks can you turn to when the opponent is figuring you out? And so I think Hardenstein already did the 2 hardest jobs, and I don't think he's needed as much in this series, because I don't think Indiana has that drastic rebounding advantage and physicality advantage that those other teams had, where you do need a Hartenstein to negate some of those advantages by being a big body, by blocking stuff off, by rebounding at a high level. And that's why I don't think that they're going to be as punished as much by not having him out there, and why you can take him off. But I do think he's a liability in some other areas, and those are ridiculous differences with Holmgren at the 5 and not.
Absolutely. And also, just for the team, I know that I've mentioned these numbers before, but when Chet is at the 5 without Hartenstein. They are a plus 18.4 net team. Their offensive rating skyrockets. It's over 123. Their defensive rating is nasty. It's under 105. When they go double big in these playoffs, they're just a +1 net team. And that difference has been much more dramatic in these playoffs than it was in the regular season. But even in the regular season, they were at their most effective when they went one big and they had a bunch of speed and a bunch of perimeter skill around them. So, Logan, I think you hit the nail on the head. It was a money move from the Thunder to go out there and get Isaiah Hartenstein, especially on a contract that is so well structured where they're only committed for 2 years, and it's this little transitional signing before they have to pay Chet and J-Dub massive money. Like, absolutely brilliant signing. But you don't have to play the guy 30 minutes in every matchup. You don't have to start him in every matchup. And this is a matchup where I think going small or going Chet at the 5 is where you're going to be most effective on both sides of the ball.
I completely agree, and I think it's just going to make the Oklahoma City offense that much harder to stop because you're going to be able to go 5 out. You're going to have Turner and Siakam. This is, in theory, if they're in man coverage, obviously. If they're helping off, you're going to have guys open in the corners all game. And Hartenstein does limit your spacing a little bit in that respect. But I do think Hartenstein could have a big series off the bench against some of the Pacers' bench bigs, right? If they're rocking with Obi, if they're going small ball, if it's Thomas Bryant, whoever it is, I think he can also, I'm trying to say that I still think Hartenstein has a role and is going to be effective in this series because he's such an impactful and winning player. But I do think the best role for him in this series is to come off the bench and to give them a little bit of a spark.
For sure. He can dominate on the glass in some of those groups. I mean, that's the most significant thing. And his offensive value for the bench groups, his ability to be that playmaking 5 is super valuable. I think Isaiah Hartenstein is really, really good. I just think Chet is best at the 5, and this OKC team, especially in this matchup, is at their best with him at the 5. But a big reason for that, as I've mentioned, is because I don't like Hart with the starting 5 defensively in this series. So let's talk about that aspect of it. OKC has been the best defense in basketball, not just this year, but in a long time. But I think that Indiana has been the best offense in basketball this year, and especially in these playoffs. So how does OKC approach trying to slow down that offense, Logan? And how do you think that battle sort of plays out?
It really is an interesting battle, one of the most fascinating battles of my lifetime between these offenses and defenses. Oklahoma City is the best defensive rating in these playoffs thus far, 104.7. They're averaging a ridiculous 10.8 steals per game and 5.6 blocks per game. Just a historically great defense. And then you talk about the offense. Carson, I found this stat. Shout out to NBA.com for this one. Indiana is the second team to ever average 115 or more points per game, 28 assists per game in the first 3 rounds of the playoffs since the 2019 Warriors.
Wow.
That's historic company to be a part of, and so it is going to be a really interesting battle. The reason that, first to touch on the Hartenstein point, I think Hartenstein is a glaring weak point in this defense when you think about what Indiana likes to do, specifically against Tyrese Haliburton. Now, Haliburton did not have a great regular season against this team. He only averages 11.5 points per game and 5.5 assists per game on 58% true shooting. Didn't turn the ball over, but I mean, that's the Pacers' best player. I get Siakam won Eastern Conference MVP. Haliburton is this team's best player, and they held him to that in the regular season. But Haliburton likes to do a lot of those high screen and rolls with a Siakam, with a Turner, and if Oklahoma City is switching off like they normally do, Hartenstein, I think, is a guy that Haliburton is going to be able to shoot over the top of and really work on that switch. But also, and probably more importantly, Indiana loves to push the pace, and I just think that double big lineup could be problematic. Nowhere near as problematic as the Knicks getting dogged the way they did in transition, but I do think Hartenstein is the guy that could be lugging behind and could allow them to get out on the break. Holmgren just makes them faster, more up-tempo, so I think that's the right coverage. But if I'm Oklahoma City, Carson, I really think I'm content, and I'm going to try my best to defend Indiana in single coverage, every one of their guys. That's Hallie's superpower. That's a lot of these guys' superpower, their ability to draw doubles and to take a bunch of attention and create open opportunities. If I'm Oklahoma City, I'm trying to defend these guys in single coverage as much as possible. And I think that job gets a little bit easier if you have Holmgren at the 5. You're a little more switchable. Everybody's faster. Their feet are better. And again, you just want to limit the easy reads that I think Indiana can make and all the easy and open opportunities that they manufacture. And I think the best way to limit that is to limit doubles and try to defend them in single coverage as much as possible. And I think they've got the personnel to do it.
With Chet at the 5, they're the fastest defense I've ever seen. Just flat out. And that's what you want to be against this Indiana team. You want to be maximizing your speed and your switchability, because when you have any sort of traditional big on the floor, and like Hartenstein is a good defensive player, Hartenstein can move his feet out in space a little bit. He's got good hands. I think that he's a really good two-way center, but he is not somebody who I want switching out onto these guards. And we saw in the regular season matchups that Nembhard was able to exploit him out in space off of switches. Hallie was able to exploit him out in space off of switches. And if you are going to try to play him in drop coverage, we know that the Pacers just absolutely destroy drop because of the pick and pop game from their bigs, because of how incredibly effective Hallie is as a scorer against drop when he's getting into floater range. That's when he's at his most comfortable. And with this team, the ball moves faster than it does for anybody else in the league, and they have more offensive weapons who can find a way to exploit a slower footed center. Hartenstein really struggled defensively in his minutes against Indiana this regular season. I mentioned the guards beating him off of switches. Pascal Siakam, who he was matched up with for a time, was just too quick for him. He's just a little bit slower on rotations. He's having to give guys a little bit more cushion, so they're walking into some more comfortable threes. Like, he's just the slowest guy on this Oklahoma City defense by a good bit, and so he gives Indiana a target. And the Thunder were -3 with Hartenstein, and they were +30 without him over those 2 regular season games versus Indiana. And keep in mind, that's without Chet. Chet wasn't available for either of those games. So even without their best center and their alternative normally as the lone big, they were able to convincingly win the minutes when Hartenstein was off the floor. We've just seen in every series, Indiana has absolutely toasted whoever the true center is. And I'm certainly not comparing Hartenstein to Brook Lopez or Karl Anthony Towns, but even Jared Allen, right? A guy who you also think can get out and guard in space a little bit. He was food defensively in that series, and I thought that the Cavs were much more effective when they had Mobley at the 5. So similar mold for OKC, but they're just a much, much better defense. I would start either Kaysen or Caruso over Hartenstein. I would probably go with Caruso just because I think when you're switching everything, well, first of all, he's the better all-around basketball player. He's the more destructive defender, even though Kaysen is great there. But specifically, switching on to bigger players, Caruso is so special there. But it's probably going to be Kaysen. He was their starter throughout the year whenever they were without one of the bigs. Caruso barely started, and that's fine. I just think that you want one of those super quick guards who can also shoot the basketball and play from the perimeter offensively over Hartenstein. And then with Chet at center, you switch everything. And I might put Chet on Siakam. I think that that's a really tough matchup for Siakam, trying to score over Chet with all of his length, and he is absolutely quick enough to guard him out in space. And I would put J-Dub on Miles Turner, I think, and then you go Dort on Hallie, and you go Kaysen Wallace on Nembhard, presuming that Kaysen is starting. I think that that is a hell of a defensive configuration, and they don't necessarily have to switch everything. Like, I would be okay with Chet playing in a high drop against Hallie where you're trying to take away those floaters. But I would say let's just come out and let's try switching. And let's see if Hallie can punish Chet on an island, because Chet is a 74th percentile isolation defender this year, man. He can really move out in space. And the whole idea of switching everything is you're not conceding any immediate advantages where they can quickly pit you apart with passing. Because if you show, well, now you have a defender who's trying to recover probably to a popping shooter, and that can be an easy read and a catch and shoot 3 or a closeout attack, and then they put you into rotation. If you're playing drop, there's a number of looks that are automatically available to them. If you blitz, right now you're conceding a 4-on-3. Like, these are all ways in which there is immediately a shot available for the Indiana offense, and you're probably going to be in rotation. And once you're in rotation, that ball moves so fast, and everybody can make a play as a shooter, as a driver, as a passer, and it's just incredibly difficult to defend Indiana like that. When you switch, the only advantage that you're theoretically conceding is, well, now the offensive player has a more favorable one-on-one matchup because the guy who switched onto them isn't their assignment. But when you can truly switch everything with 5 awesome defenders, then you're just not conceding much of an advantage. So containing that initial dribble penetration is the key against this Indiana offense. And I think that a switching OKC defense with Chet at the 5 is easily the best equipped to do that of anybody in basketball. I would like to see OKC come out doing that and mostly stay home, like you said, Logan, and trust your ability to defend at an elite level on an island. You try to force Hallie to beat a number of elite defenders in space as a one-on-one scorer. And I think that his ability to beat Chet specifically off of switches will be massive in this series. Hallie has been really good beating bigs off switches in these playoffs, but Chet is a different level of challenge from anybody else he's faced with his ability to move out in space and with his length. And Hallie is by far most effective as an isolation scorer when he has a true mismatch. I love the guy to death. You know that. But when it comes to him just facing like straight up awesome defenders one-on-one without a screen, he's not necessarily super comfortable as a scorer in that setting. So I think that they have a number of awesome defenders who they can throw at him and give him some challenges and some issues. And then with Pascal Siakam, you try to force him to try to attack mismatches off of switches against the team that has been the best at preventing big forwards from doing that in basketball. Look at what happened to Triple J, who melted down trying to attack mismatches against OKC. Look what happened to Julius Randle, who melted down trying to attack mismatches. These guys can't get the ball in the post because OKC is so phenomenal at fronting them and fighting for post position and bringing backside doubles that are perfectly timed. When they can get the ball, they're dealing with these physical guards with their swiping hands, and it's so difficult to put the ball on the floor against them. Like, Siakam is a better scorer than those guys, than Triple J and than Julius Randle, in my opinion. I think his ability to utilize the mid-range could be really valuable because if he just gets the ball, he can shoot over top with pretty good efficiency in a way that other guys couldn't. He doesn't have to fight as hard for like great post position, but he's in a pretty similar archetype to those guys, and he's going to face a lot of those same challenges in the half court. And if they do get to a point where they're like, okay, we have to double, well then they're the fastest defense I've seen. They're the best at forcing turnovers that I've seen. And even though, as I said, you want to stay out of rotation against Indiana as much as possible, there is no defense that is better at rotating with elite speed and making plays in those settings than OKC with Chet at the 5. But the whole philosophy here defensively for me is you take away any targets because Indiana is amazing at identifying defensive weak points and bringing those dudes into the action over and over. We have seen it in every single series. Brook Lopez, you are food. Jared Allen, you are going to get destroyed. Karl Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson, you are going to get destroyed. They're just so smart about their offensive approach. You just don't give them anybody to go at. Like, Hartenstein is the only guy, in my opinion, who could be that. And with him playing fewer minutes, I think that OKC is by far the defense best equipped to actually slow this Pacers offense down, which we haven't seen anybody else capable of doing in these playoffs.
You mean in the starting lineup, right?
Right. Obviously, I'm not saying he doesn't play, but I'm saying he plays 16 minutes a game, and you have Chet out there for the other 32.
I do think that's the component. I think you hit on it right at the end there with the Pacers. That's the key to me on if the Pacers can really win this series. It's going to be their cerebralness, their half-court control, and their ability to punish mismatches, which are much fewer with this elite Oklahoma City defense, but I do think they have a few advantages. If it is Hartenstein versus a Hallie or just attacking him in the pick and roll, anytime he's out there, I would be going at him. I think that Hallie versus Kayson could be interesting. And the reason I highlight him is just because I think Hallie can shoot over the top of Kayson, where I don't think he's going to be able to disrupt his shot as much. Great on-ball defender, obviously, and on drives and stuff like that. But I think Hallie could shoot over the top of him. And then I do think Siakam's huge. And tell me if you think I'm crazy for this, Carson. I would try to get that Siakam-Chet matchup. I think that's one where I think Siakam can win with his strength advantage. Now, I think Chet's going to win some possessions, obviously. He's not going to just dominate this series. But when I look at somebody that is going to play a lot, well, I think Siakam can beat Hartenstein, too, with his speed. But I would be trying to go with Chet a little bit more with Siakam with his strength and see if I could win there. Like, again, I don't think it's going to be a super effective strategy, but I don't want to go with J-Dub. I think J-Dub is a great post defender. I don't want to go with Caruso. I don't want to go with Dort. This is in the Siakam matchup, but Chet is the guy that I think Chet or SGA, I guess, against Siakam, and I'm going to try to weaponize Siakam's strength advantage in those matchups.
Well, I think that you definitely want to try to get SGA switched onto him as much as possible, but I don't agree with Chet. I think that Chet would do a phenomenal job
I think
on
he's too
Siakam.
long.
I think he's too damn long, man, and I think that he is more than quick enough. Like, I think that Chet gets really underrated as a one-on-one defender. I mentioned his isolation defense. He's an 86th percentile post-up defender, too.
I mean, he's great. I just think Siakam on drives could bump him initially off those spots a little bit and get some offense.
I see what you're saying, but there is nobody who is more difficult to finish against at the rim than Chet Holmgren. There's nobody who's more difficult to shoot over top of. I mean, maybe not literally nobody because of Wemby, but like he is in that absolute top tier in terms of his ability to affect you with his length. And I think that gets underrated, and people look at like, you know, a Jokic being able to go at Chet, and you have to understand that's a 280-pound man and the best offensive player in basketball. And I just don't think that Siakam's strength advantage is significant enough for me to feel like he's really gonna do super well in that matchup. I do have one concern about OKC's defense as I've laid it out. I think it's going to be really difficult for them to keep Chet around the rim defensively. Like, I don't think that they can deploy him as a roamer, which they've been very inclined to do. We saw them do it, of course, this past series against Minnesota, where he's matched up with Jaden McDaniels for a vast majority of the time. I don't think there's anybody who you can really roam off of here. Aaron Nesmith is shooting 50% from three in the playoffs. Like, I would just be scared to roam off him at all. And then I think that they do need Chet and J-Dub to guard Siakam and Turner in some combination. I think those are the two guys in their downside starting five who are capable of handling those matchups. So what that means is, with him matched up with one of these bigs who are more than capable of playing out in space and shooting threes, obviously, Turner and Siakam, and especially with OKC switching everything, if that's what they do, that means that Indiana may be able to keep Chet out in space and keep him away from the rim. And even though he may be really effective guarding Hallie on an island, right? Maybe that's not where the advantage is. The reality is, if Chet is in that Hallie matchup, he's out on the three-point line. We know that Hallie is more than willing to just make a swing pass, and now there's more opportunities for driving lanes for guys around him. There's just way less rim protection. And so I do wonder if that could be a downside of the switch everything strategy that I am talking about. And if maybe they do still go Chet at the five, which I think that they should, just because speed is so important all around in transition on their rotations. But maybe they're switching 1 through 4, and then they do have Chet playing in like a high drop coverage. And I could be okay with that just because you don't want him stuck out on the perimeter for these extended stretches. But at the end of the day, like, I don't know that there's really a way around that, because you could even try pre-switching to keep him on the baseline. But again, you just can't help off of anybody like that in this Indiana offense. The keys for Indiana in this series, in my opinion, Hallie has to specifically shoot the step back three really well. Like, that's got to be his go-to weapon when it comes to beating switches. That's his go-to weapon as a scorer. That's been up and down in these playoffs. That is a vitally important shot. I also want to see Indiana finding ways to get him involved off ball, because I think he's going to be dealing with so much pressure. I think that he is going to be dealing with so many elite one-on-one defenders. Like, let's see how we can get him other easy opportunities, attacking off the catch, maybe getting a catch and shoot three. We know that he is incredibly willing to play away from the ball. That might be where he has more of a chance of getting freed up. I also think Siakam is pivotal here, because like, he has to be at a totally different level from Randall and Triple J as a mismatch attacker if Indiana wants to win this series. He has to be able to protect the basketball. He has to be able to get the basketball consistently in the post, which I think is really hard. And he has to be able to beat them with his mid-range shooting. And then just two team-wide keys. Everybody has to take care of the basketball. OKC is the best defense at turning you over that we've seen in a long time.
And that was a problem in the regular season. Well, I mean, by Indiana standards.
Well, it was more just a problem in terms of the differential, because OKC didn't turn the ball over at all. One of the two regular season meetings, OKC turned the ball over 3 times, and that margin is going to be very important in this series. It's so much easier said than done, but Indiana is one of the best at protecting the basketball, and they have to be able to do so reasonably well against OKC. And then Indiana has to get lots of transition chances. They have to be able to try to get that early offense wherever they can. Again, OKC is incredible at limiting those opportunities for other teams, but the more you have to play against them in the half court, the harder it becomes to score. I do think that Indiana is the best offense in the league, but I still think that they're in for a rough series. Man, you mentioned Hallie's numbers this regular season in this matchup, how rough they were. He had a 4-point game. Siakam only averaged 16.5 points per game on 58% true shooting, and it's nothing specific to those guys, man. I went and I looked at all of these stars that OKC has faced in these playoffs and their offensive production. I mean, it's just insane the dips that they all take, man. Ant is giving you 23 points, 4.5 assists, more than 3 turnovers on under 57% true shooting. Randall is 17 points per game with more turnovers than assists. Jokic, his scoring volume is down a little bit. His assists are way down, under 6 a game. His turnovers are way up, 4.5 a game. His true shooting percentage is way down. Triple J averaged 16 points per game with twice as many turnovers as assists on 48% true shooting. Ja gave you 47.5% true shooting. Like, their ability to limit the production and efficiency of stars and force them into mistakes is just incredible. And their ability to overall stifle offenses, it's historic. Like, this is a great stat that Hoop Venue tweeted out, because I've been talking about how OKC has the best raw relative defensive rating that we've seen since the 71 Bucks. So that's already more than 50 years. But if you adjust for their opponents, and if you just look at how far they are holding their opponents below their regular season offensive rating, that number for OKC was 12.4 points in the Western Conference playoffs. That passes the 1964 Celtics for the best in NBA history among teams to make the finals. When you surpass the 60s Celtics in any sort of relative defensive rating category, that probably means that you took the number 1 spot of all time. And that's what OKC did here. So I just think that's what you have to understand. Like, you're running up against the best defense we've seen in at least 2 decades. That is the minimum that I will give this OKC defense. Best since the 04 Pistons. I do want to be clear, though. I think Indiana will have counters. It's not just going to be like, oh my God, they're switching everything and they stagnated our entire offense. Like, they'll run lots of double drags and stuff to get Hallie free. They have the best decision maker in basketball leading their offense in Hallie. They run some of the smartest and quickest hitting actions in basketball. So they'll have their counters and they'll land their punches and they'll get their chances in transition. Like, I have so much respect for this Indiana offense, and I'm not expecting some disaster out of them whatsoever. This is just a different beast. You look at what OKC has done, and you just have to expect a sizable dip in offensive efficiency against that team, because that's what literally everybody has gone through. And I do think that OKC has some very unique answers for Indiana's offense that nobody else has had.
I do too. I think that's the biggest advantage that Oklahoma City has because of how historically great they are. Yeah, the final piece that I would mention on that is that, and I think you saw this with a lot of Oklahoma City's opponents throughout these playoffs, Indiana's going to have to not melt down. They're going to have to keep their composure. And I wouldn't normally bring this up in most matchups, and this isn't an Indiana negative thing. It's just playing Oklahoma City. It's like, I don't know if I've ever seen a team as visibly frustrated as I did the Minnesota Timberwolves last series. And like, especially in that last game that they played, where it's just like they just threw their hands up and gave up. And it's not like I expect Indiana to fold up, but that is one of the most unique challenges of playing this team, Oklahoma City, is really just keeping your composure. And this is going to sound stupid, but like, staying positive. Oklahoma City beats the belief out of teams. And Draymond Green said this a long time ago on his show, but it's like, if you as an opponent can beat the belief out of the team, the game's over. They already lost. And so I think that is going to be a big key for this Indiana team throughout this series, is just their composure and their resilience. And I think it's going to be a major test on the fortitude of this team, because there is no team I have ever watched, and I mean this, that demoralizes. Actually, I can't say that. Maybe next to the Prime Warriors, that just demoralizes opponents in the way that Oklahoma City does. And so it may be a bit cliche. It may not be something that we can tangibly measure through statistics, but literally keeping your head on, staying cool, not getting flustered by this team, because Oklahoma City does it to everybody they play. Again, said this a million times during the show, easier said than done, but I think that's going to be a huge challenge for Indiana as this series goes along.
That's actually an area in which I feel better about Indiana's ability to hold up than a lot of other teams, than maybe any other team. And the reason for that is I think a couple of the areas in which OKC normally just totally separates against teams, they'll still have an advantage against Indiana, but it will be less sizable. That's in the turnover margin. That's in the transition margin. And that's where games can go from 5-point deficits to 30-point deficits like that, because it just builds and builds, and it's defense into offense. And that's what OKC does literally at the highest level ever. I think Indiana can mitigate some of that. I do think that they have an offensive floor because of their ability to play with pace that is higher than any other team. I do think that they have a level of composure that does come from Hallie, that does come from the level of overall offensive skill, their ability to protect the basketball. They're very well coached. They're very deep. They play hard as hell. Like, just when it comes to meeting OKC's energy level, Indiana is definitely one of the best equipped in basketball there. So I absolutely see what you're saying. We see this. I mean, I called them the most miserable team to play against in NBA history, OKC, because they're literally just destroying your offense, and then they are turning that into their own offense over and over and over again, and that can be so demoralizing. I just don't think that they can do that quite at the same level against Indiana. That being said, I think that both of those are keys. I think that those are some key aspects of this series, and these two teams embody a lot of the keys that I've been talking about throughout these playoffs. Depth. I mean, these are two teams with excellent depth. These are two teams with lineup versatility, like you mentioned, Logan. These are two teams that have dominated the transition battle, and they have dominated the turnover battle. So I do look at that possession battle as being a key, because these have been the two best teams at winning the turnover margin in these playoffs. OKC is still on another level, though. Like, Indiana is plus 1.5 in turnovers per game. OKC is plus 6.2. It's the biggest margin we've seen in a playoff run.
Dude, these are also the two best transition scoring teams in the playoff field, too, by transition points margin over their opponents. Indiana's scoring 8.5 more transition points per game than their opponents. Oklahoma City is scoring 8.1 more transition points per game than their opponents during the playoffs, too.
And by the way, they are also just flat out the top two transition scoring teams, and they're two of the top three transition defenses. So absolutely, I do think that the turnover margin is advantage OKC, but again, not by quite as massive a margin as we're used to. That is going to be more of an even battle, but still going to favor the Thunder. On the boards, when we're looking at that aspect of the transition battle, I think that this is pretty close to a draw. I think it's maybe slight edge OKC. They've been the better rebounding team, but since I think Hartenstein is going to play less in this series, and he's obviously by far their best rebounder, that diminishes that advantage. So I think it'll probably be very close on the boards. And I think overall, OKC does probably win the possession battle again in this one, but they're going up against a team that's been great in that respect. And then transition, you said it, Logan. I mean, if you look at all of the teams since Synergy began tracking this in 2005 to have at least a +8 transition point per game margin, that's their transition offense minus the points that they're allowing in transition. That entire club is the Suns in 2006, the Suns in 2007, the Bucks in 2019, 2021, and 2022. So shout out to both of those two teams for being on this list multiple times. And then it's this year's Thunder, and it's this year's Pacers. So they are truly two of the best ever at dominating the transition margin, being elite at transition offense and defense. And both teams absolutely want to play extremely fast in this series. I think that for Indiana, it's so important that they are able to get some early offense opportunities where they're not against a fully set OKC defense, because that's when I think that just schematically they can pose such unique problems, and obviously their personnel is insane. And for OKC, they want to be turning defense into offense as much as possible, and they want to be getting out and running. That's where they're so explosive and so efficient. It's probably more important, though, that Indiana is able to get a lot of transition chances in this series, in my opinion. I think it's important for both, but more so for the Pacers, because facing OKC's half-court defense has been such hell. They are allowing 0.89 points per possession in the half court in these playoffs, man. And that's while facing 3 of the top 8 regular season offenses. Like, it's just absurd. Meanwhile, Indiana has been a great transition defense, but they've only been a 25th percentile half-court defense in these playoffs, and I do think that Shai can pick them apart there, and I think that that's where he is going to give OKC really quite a high offensive floor, and he's going to be extremely comfortable in that matchup. But I think that those are some keys to this one. Transition battle, turnover battle, absolutely. Both teams have been great there, and now they're going up against the best of the best in those categories.
I think it's such an interesting matchup, man. And just like in general, you got to be fast, man. You can't have these slow-footed liabilities. Like, I just think you're seeing a little bit of a transition in the NBA right now. And I'm not saying that those guys aren't going to have a role in the league, but you need to have a look where you can fly up and down the court, because these teams will just – I mean, it literally felt like the Pacers just kicked the Knicks in the teeth in some of those games, man, where they're flying up and down transition. Same thing with Oklahoma City versus Minnesota, man. It's just you getting boat raced immediately.
I mean, Indiana had 46 transition points in Game 6 against the Knicks.
That discrepancy in that entire series was ridiculous. I think they tripled up or something like the Knicks in transition points.
They were plus 80, I believe, in transition points, and they were plus 79 in points off turnovers. It's just absolutely absurd. Neither one of these teams is going to do this to the other in this series, that's for sure. But who can have the edge is going to be important.
In individual games, I definitely think it could fluctuate or favor one team or the other. Same goes for shooting as well.
I agree, and that could be the thing that swings this game, especially because, like, it can build, right? Every time that you get a stop, it becomes easier to get a score, and it becomes harder for the other team to get a score because now they're facing your set defense, and, like, getting stops, man, it just gives you more and more chances to run, especially when you're forcing turnovers. So absolutely, that can just sort of compound itself. There's one more thing that I want to talk about in this series. I've said earlier in these playoffs that home court advantage really hasn't been much of a thing. There's one team for whom it is still very much a factor, and that's the Oklahoma City Thunder, man. OKC this year is 44-7 at home. In the playoffs, they are 8-1 at home with a plus 24.6 point differential per game. They have literally played 2 competitive games at home in this entire postseason. Other than that, it's all been blowout wins. And even their one loss was just the crazy sort of joke at the end against Denver in game 1. They've been effectively impossible to beat there. In fact, they already have the best point differential at home in a postseason in NBA history, Logan. That's in 9 games. They're plus 221 in 9 games. Number 2 all time is the 08 Celtics, who were plus 195 in 14 games. It's crazy.
Damn, man, that makes me want to shave a game off. I'm not going to lie to you.
It's going to be really hard for Indiana to win one in OKC.
I agree. And
they've been really good on the road, but it's just crazy what OKC's doing at home.
They've mentioned this a lot throughout the playoffs when they have games in Oklahoma City, and it's a big cliche, but I do completely agree. I think it's the best environment in basketball. I think it's the toughest place to play, too. Like, they always talk about how it's a EuroLeague-style environment, but it really does feel that way. Like, the fans are loud, they are passionate, and they're coordinated. Like, it's not, I wouldn't use the word scary because I don't ever think playing basketball is a scary thing.
Yeah.
But there's an edge there, and I think there's an intimidation factor that it's just they're rowdy, they're raucous, they're loud, it's one of the best environments in basketball I've seen in some time.
And they are the exact sort of team that actually does feed off of that energy because they play with such crazy energy. And so when they are able to put together like those big momentum plays, steals into transition dunks, like it all just builds. And I do think that the crowd is part of that, like feeling even more overwhelming. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say that it's a big thing, but they're also a young team. So you're just more in your element. You're more comfortable when you're at home.
It's like the momentum bar on like video games and stuff like that, like building up. But I do think it's a component in why this team is so good at putting together runs and just ripping them off. I mean, I think it's the loudest arena in basketball, and there's some great environments too. I think Boston's really hard to play in. I think Madison Square Garden is really tough to play in. Denver, I think, is a really good environment, but I think Oklahoma City's the top.
Yeah, Denver might be the biggest home court advantage in basketball overall, just because you also have the literal altitude aspect of it.
I might still go OKC, but it's close between those two.
Logan, shall we get down to the official predictions?
Let's
What
do
do you
it.
got? Who are you taking to win it all?
I've got Oklahoma City in 6, and I'm doing that out of a certain respect I have for Indiana. I know there's a lot of negative Nellies out there saying it's going to be an ugly series. Oklahoma City's going to win in 4. I could see them winning in 5 just because of that home court advantage, and how big that is. But the reasons I'm going with the Thunder, I trust OKC's defense to make Indiana Stars more uncomfortable than vice versa. I trust Oklahoma City to defend better in single coverage. And I'm betting on an all-time special defense and an all-time offensive basketball player. And if you didn't already know, if you didn't already appreciate it, I do think the finals are going to cement both of those things to be very, very true. We've been talking about how historically great this defense is. We've been talking about how historically great SGA is as an offensive basketball player, and I think this is their moment to finally cement it and put it in stone and bring home a title to Oklahoma City. But the reason I say 6, don't underestimate Indiana. I don't think this team gets swept. People have doubted Indiana every step of the way, and I know Pacers fans are probably listening to this and going, oh, well, the nerds are doing it too by picking against them. I'm not going to pick them to get swept. I have way too much respect for Haliburton and this team in totality to pick them to get swept. But I do think they are the inferior team. And you know what? It's not a negative Indiana thing by any means. I think Indiana would stand a chance to win the finals against a lot of other teams that would have come out of the Western Conference. Oklahoma City, to me, is just that great.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going with the Thunder in 6. And honestly, maybe that's the optimist in me, hoping for a good series. I'm definitely much closer to OKC in 5 than I am to OKC in 7. And what you were talking about with this being a moment for OKC to prove that Shai is one of those all-time guards, that they are an all-time defense. Like, I do wonder if they've reached that level with how great they were last series, where, like, this could be really, really emphatic from them, because I think that Shai is going to dominate. I think that he is going to be effectively unstoppable in this series. I feel really good about the offense around him right now with how they shot last series, with how Chet and Jada played last series. And I just think like their GOAT level defense has much more answers for Indiana's offense than vice versa. The reason that I'm still going to go 6 is there's probably a game where Chet and J-Dub in the shooting are off. Like, we can't act like that is consistent every single night. Those guys are all great and the shooting is great, because it hasn't been throughout these playoffs. There's been plenty of inconsistency with the shooting especially. And there's probably a game where Indiana plays with more energy and their stars are great and they shoot the hell out of the ball. And their offense is just so awesome. And they're just so good. And they're 46-18 since January 1st. They have the second best record in basketball in that time. Like, I can't quite pick them to go down in 5. And even if they were to, it wouldn't be an Indiana thing. You know, if you're still going to try to spin some narrative, like, what else did you need to see from this team to know that they're a deserving finalist, man? And, like, I get Pacers fans absolutely feeling like they've been doubted every step of the way. What I would say is this is different. Like, listen, I confidently picked them to beat the Bucks. I confidently picked them to beat the Knicks. But you're now talking about 68-win Thunder. Top 2 net rating in a regular season in NBA history. Highest playoff net rating we've seen from a finalist since the 2017 Warriors. Just truly one of the most talented teams that we've ever seen. Like, you have to understand it's not disrespect. It's not skepticism of anything to do with Indiana. I couldn't be higher on Hallie. I love this team. I love this offense. The Thunder are just that great. So I'll also say, if iHeart starts for OKC, that's worth a game for Indiana, in my opinion. That makes me feel more confident in 6 compared to 5, because I think that that would just be advantageous for the Pacers on both sides of the ball. But I don't expect that to happen. I think that Daigneault is going to make the move. And I will say, if OKC does, like, destroy this Indiana team with how great their offense has been, with how consistently impressive they've been throughout these playoffs, only dropping 4 games, being the best team in the East by record for way over half the year at this point, like, that would be something to behold. I don't think they're going to destroy them. I think Indiana's floor is too high in a few ways, but that would be crazy. That would be like this sort of, okay, this is an all-time team moment from OKC.
I think so too. I think it would say more about Oklahoma City than it does Indiana. My final question to you, Carson, as our resident basketball historian,
Please.
And I know the pace of play was much higher back in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think this is going to be the fastest NBA Finals ever, just in terms of how they get the ball up and down the court?
Well, it's not possible just because the 60s pace was so ridiculous and the 70s pace was so ridiculous when we're talking about teams averaging 120 possessions per game. In the modern era, yes, I would actually expect it to be the fastest finals of this century for sure. I mean, these teams are both top 3 in pace in these playoffs, right? Yeah, they're both top 3 in these playoffs in pace, so up and down the court. So I think it's going to be a lightning fast pace this series, which I'm very excited for. I do have some more questions for you, Logan. First one, can Indiana win this series? And how does Indiana win this series if they do?
You put Tony Bradley out there and you hurt SGA.
Dude, stop. What sort of fucking juju are you putting in the air?
I ain't putting no juju. I'm just telling you that's the secret sauce.
So you actually don't think Indiana has any chance of winning other than that?
I think somebody would have to get hurt for Oklahoma City. If not, I think Siakam would have to be dominant in transition. I think Siakam would have to be dominant in the half court. I'm talking 25-plus points because he would be that guy that I'm going to pick to go off. I think Turner would have to be nails and knockdown as a shooter. That's something that I'm a little bit more skeptical of in this matchup. I think that Nembhard would also have to go off. He had a great regular season against Oklahoma City, but he's been very inconsistent in these playoffs offensively. But the real issue that I come down to is Hallie and Hallie's effectiveness as a scorer consistently. I think Hallie's going to make the great decisions. I think he's going to protect the basketball. My issue is really Hallie consistently finding his shot. The step-back threes, the floaters. It's really just my respect for this Oklahoma City defense. There is an opportunity, but Indiana would almost have to play like a flawless series, Carson. I think they would have to be damn near flawless.
I actually look at the opportunity for them as probably being more with OKC's offense faltering. And I would look at Chet and I would look at J-Dub and I would look at the shooters. And
in turn would turn into offense for Indiana potentially on the other end too.
Yes, that is true. But that's where I feel like OKC could be vulnerable. I mean, that's where they were vulnerable against Denver. I do think that Indiana's offense is great, absolutely, but I think that Hallie and Siakam both would just like have to way outperform what should be reasonable versus this defense for the offense to be like what's carrying them through. And again, I think that they'll perform better offensively probably against OKC than any other team has. I don't know. Minnesota's numbers are inflated by game 3 of that series. Like overall, Minnesota really struggled. So maybe Indiana won't post the best straight up offensive rating, but I feel like they'll be the most consistent. That's what I would say. I feel like they are the best equipped to not get their asses handed to them. Like, obviously, there's 2 games where OKC destroys Memphis. There's 2 games where they destroy Denver. There's multiple games where they totally soundly outplay Minnesota and, beat them by 20-something in game 1. But, like, game 5 is when they go out there and they're up 40. Every team has had that moment against OKC. If anybody's going to avoid that, I would say it's Indiana. But still, it's very hard for me to see. It's very hard for me to envision them winning this series. I can't say it's impossible, but I would say that it is highly unlikely. I've got another question for you. Who is the potential role player hero for either side in this series?
I mean, are we still considering Alex Caruso a role player?
Yeah, we're talking about players of that caliber, just like guys who aren't carrying star offensive loads. Kind of anybody outside of the big 3 for OKC and the top 2 for Indiana, I would accept as an answer here.
For Oklahoma City, I would say definitely Caruso. Just with the level that he's been at as a defender and how he can wreak havoc and literally just all across the board as a shooter, as a connective playmaker, as a defender, with his ability to switch on, and specifically his ability to defend not only everybody on the court, but specifically Indiana stars. Like, he can match up with Siakam. He can match up with Hallie. So for them, it's Caruso. And for Indiana, I'd say Nembhard or Nesmith.
Yeah.
I really like Nembhard. I'm so disappointed that the level of shot making he's been at in these playoffs, because I really like the shots that he's getting to, and I really
I mean, let's not do in these playoffs because he was balling early.
Yeah,
and then
I guess
he
just
had
last
a skid
series
against New York. Yeah.
Yeah, last series was really ugly, but he's a really good defender. Does Miles Turner count as a role player?
Sure.
I think Miles Turner's a big swing factor in this series too, just with how hard his job is. But Turner has the potential every game to give you 20, if his shot is on and if he's being aggressive and coordinated. So I'd take Turner and Nembhard for Indiana. I think could swing this series. And I can't see, that's the thing. Both of these teams' depth is elite. Like any given game, I could see a role player stepping up and having a big night. But that's who I'd earmark. I think it's probably more important for Indiana that Turner gets going reliably.
I would go with Caruso as well for OKC. I just think his ability, as you said, to be a guy you throw at Hallie and is a great option there, who can switch on to bigger players like a Pascal Siakam, who for possessions even can be matched up with a Miles Turner, and he's just so disruptive. He's so effective playing above his size, and he's always in the right spots. If Indiana does try to mix in his zone, he's a guy who I really trust as a decision maker there, being in the middle, getting to little short jumpers, spotting cutters, being a cutter, being a spot up shooter, just so proven with the experience, the versatility on both sides of the ball. He's been like the role player hero for them of every series so far. So, I don't know if he's a valid answer at this point. He's just truly one of their best players and an incredible basketball player. But I think he has the potential to swing any series, especially when it comes to guarding big forwards. And he's been tasked with that in some way or another in every series up to this point. And he's done a great job. For Indiana, I would also go with Nembhard, specifically because I think that, first of all, he's going to have an important task defensively no matter what. Whether it's Shai or J-Dub, he's going to be guarding one of OKC's best offensive players. And then offensively, I do think that he is kind of uniquely capable of actually producing against this OKC defense because of his ability as a tough shot maker, because of his ability to do damage from the mid-range, because of his quickness as a ball handler. Obviously, it's incredibly difficult for anybody to score one-on-one against OKC's perimeter defense, but I could see Nembhard having a couple of big games like that. I could see a game or two where he even outscores Hallie in that way. And like you said, he did play really well in the regular season. So I think that he is pretty darn important on both sides of the ball. When was the last time you were this excited for a finals matchup, Logan? When was the last time a finals matchup got your juices flowing like this on paper?
It's a good question. I don't know, ever. This might be the...
Whoa!
But
you don't think that Indiana even has a chance? I love the basketball matchup, obviously.
Well, I'm just excited to watch it. Yeah, that's kind of what I mean. Bucks Suns didn't really do it for me in the way that this series does. I'm thinking about in recent memory. Nuggets Heat didn't do it for me like that. Heat Lakers didn't do it for me like that. When I'm looking at recent memory, Boston last year, I'm not going to lie, man. Maybe Spurs Heat in 2014 or something like that. That's probably the last time I was, or no, I can't say that. Except 2015 Cavs Warriors was riddled with injuries. I was really excited for both of those in back-to-back years. Or maybe 2016 too. That stretch. I'd say somewhere between 2014 and 2016.
Yeah, listen, I've been hyping up this finals matchup. I don't want to overhype it. I think that there are definitely some that
most
have
I've been
more
excited
exciting.
for in a decade.
Both of the Spurs Heat, both of the first two Warriors Cavs, maybe Warriors Celtics, but in recent years,
maybe Dubs. I don't know, Raptors. They were hurt too, though.
Dubs Raptors was exciting until KD tore his Achilles and Clay tore his ACL, and that kind of killed the vibe. But that was a fun matchup. But 2017, 2018, it was just such a foregone conclusion that the Warriors were gonna win. Yeah, this is definitely the most I've been excited the last 3 years. I would say I was pretty excited for Warriors Celtics as well. And then you go back to the ones that we've talked about with Dubs Cavs and Spurs Heat. And there's definitely a number of matchups all time that would be above this one. But I do think that this is a really fun one. And even though there's a clear favorite, and there absolutely is, this Pacers team, is so much better than, say, the Heat team of 2 years ago that made the finals. I think that they're a better team than the Mavs who went to the finals last year. I think that they're just so much more complete. I think that like the sort of glaring exploitability that you had with the Mavs role players, their inability to make above the break threes, the inability of anybody other than Kyrie or Luka to create a shot. Like, Indiana obviously has much more offensive weaponry, and it makes them much more impervious to like a meltdown like that, in my opinion, where, the Mavs just got dogged in that series. And the Pacers, maybe they lose in 5, but I kind of think that it's a better 5. I think at least it's certainly a prettier 5 offensively from them. And at the end of the day, these are just two fun-ass teams. Regardless of how long this series goes, I think it's going to be a really exciting watch, and I am very much looking forward to it. There you have it, folks. I think that we covered everything. I don't know. I'm scanning my brain. We'll do some more content on the finals. We're going to do a mailbag episode before things get started on Thursday, since we have some time. So if there's anything we missed, and if there's any questions you guys still have, please fire away, and you can ask us anything you want about the playoffs. But I think we've covered it for now. We're both going Thunder in 6. And I cannot wait for this thing to get started. If you want to join us for this entire NBA Finals ride and you want to see all our content, you can follow us on YouTube, of course. We will be live after every game. And you can continue to see our preview content, our film breakdowns that we make throughout the finals and before the finals on our YouTube channel. You can also listen to all of our full podcast episodes across all audio platforms. And you can follow us across social media, TikTok and Instagram at NerdSesh, and Twitter at Nerd_Sesh. You can also join our Discord if you want. That is linked at the link tree across our social media bios. So with that, as always, appreciate you guys. I've been Carson Brabber.
I have been Logan Camden.
And this was Nerd Sesh.